It is good to be in the house with my Grace family today. Yes, absolutely. Just like Pastor Ray said, I am so proud of the heart of this house. I'm so proud of you and what you're doing in our community with the hundreds of service projects we've got going on, the love you show in your small groups, your generosity and the impact that's making around the world. It's absolutely incredible, and it's all being led by an amazing pastor, Pastor Garrett and Andrea Booth. Honored to serve under those guys. Got to show some love to Dan and Rachel Hunter, my mentors, and don't even get me started on you guys and the rest of this team, or else I'm not even going to preach. I'm just going to end up talking about you all day. But it's just an honor to be a part of this family. I love it. I love it. For those of you that don't know me, let me introduce myself. My name is Pastor Dallas Wilson. But more importantly, how about this? I'd like to introduce you to my squad, to my family. Go ahead and look to the screen. Check this out. You got the cute little girl with the hat. That's Brielle. She is my youngest, but somehow she thinks she's the one in charge and always telling everybody what to do. The little blonde with the glasses, that's Jade. She's going to be 8 this summer, and she is quite precocious. She is into everything and all about learning. She's great. And then there's Judah. He's my oldest. He's 11 years old, and he is all boy, and I'm very sad to report at this point in time, he now can beat me in every video game that we play. So it's just something I've learned to accept, and I've handed the crown over to him. He is the man. And of course, there's my ride or die, my best friend, my partner in crime, my fantastic favorite person in the world, my wife of 13 years, Lindsay Wilson, all about her. You're thinking, is he going to shut up? No, she's great. I love her. Last week, I love getting to celebrate her on Mother's Day. I love seeing my kids celebrate her. I love seeing my church family celebrate her. And man, mamas, you deserved all the love you got last week. Let me tell you. But we also have a very special day coming up in a few weeks called Father's Day. And on that day around here, we do this thing called Dad Fest. We're going to be handing out all sorts of prizes. We're going to be doing all sorts of freebies for all the dads in the house. We even have a car show that weekend. It's going to be fantastic. But with all this family stuff going on, I can't help but reflect on the state of my family. And I'm sure a lot of you are probably doing the exact same thing as we're in the midst of Mother's Day and Father's Day, you're thinking about how your family is going. Maybe this morning, mamas, you're thinking about the stressors with your sons. Or mamas, maybe you're thinking, or sons, maybe you're thinking about the drama with your mama. Or some of you are sitting in a chair this morning, and as you look at the mess and the madness of your marriage, you're going, is there any hope at all? Now, for the rest of you, you may be starting to check out going, okay, so we're going to be talking about family today. This does not involve me. Either I'm not married, or I don't have kids, or I'm an empty nester. I can just kind of sit back and coast through this next few minutes. But here's the thing. In some form or fashion, one thing we all have in common today is that we all have a family. Every person has a family. So no matter the state of your family today, whether you look like the Waltons and it's all put together perfect and beautiful with a sweet little bow on top, or you're more like the Simpsons and it's absolutely dysfunctional and it's an overarching mess. Either way, God knows. So whether you're separated or you've already gone through the divorce, maybe you're expecting your first, second, third, or fourth kid. God knows. Maybe you're working on blending a family. God knows that's not easy. Or maybe you're facing a health issue, a financial frustration, or you just feel like you're in constant conflict. No matter where you are, the Holy Spirit, I believe, has something that He's wanting to speak to your family today. How many of you believe that family is God's idea? Okay, I see a lot of hands out there. How many of you believe that God knows how to make our family work the right way? Okay, with that in mind, here's the decision I'm making and I'm encouraging you to make this morning. We're not ready to throw in the towel. We're not raising a white flag of surrender today. No, 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 Satan, you cannot have my home. You cannot have my children. You cannot take hold of my marriage. God knows how to do this thing right, and I'm giving him permission to get in the middle of it, and we're gonna figure this sucker out. I want you to turn to your neighbor right now, and I want you to say this: my family is worth fighting for. Okay, now I want it to be like you're picking a fight with the devil. I want you to turn to the other side, and I want you to look at him, and I want you to look at him all serious-like and say, my family is worth fighting for. Now I want you to look at the screen, and I want you to read this with me. Every family is worth fighting with. Every family is worth fighting with. The title of my message today is Fighting with Family. Now, some of you are disturbed by that, but let me go and clarify. I'm not talking about fighting with family. I'm talking about fighting with family. But I think many of us on accident or by circumstance or by the way we were raised have gotten it a little confused. And instead of fighting with our family, we're fighting with our family. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. This was a shocker to me, but in modern warfare, in modern American military life, a fatality is more common in a training exercise than it is on the modern day battlefield. I think a clear comparison could be made to our modern day American family. And that so many times, it's not the battle out there that takes us out. It's the battle around our kitchen tables. It's what's going on in our living rooms and our bedrooms. It's the screaming and shouting up and down the stairs at each other. It's the emotional text message that we didn't quite think through and now we can't take back. And ultimately, it's played out in the courtrooms across America in the form of divorce and custody battles. And what I'm talking about with divorce is not just a cultural thing, it's now a part of our Christianity thing. Because the same stats that apply to them sadly apply to us. Josh McDowell, a great theologian, apologist, and yes, a family specialist, said this: the downfall of the church will not come from the lack of apologetic teaching. It will come from the breakdown of the families in the church. If that doesn't hit home, you're not listening right now. We got to get ourselves together. We got to get in the fight for one another. Your family is worth fighting for. Your family is worth fighting with. In the process of training, that is, we're figuring out our marriage and we're raising our children, we've got to figure out how to decrease the fatality rate, how to decrease the injuries and the wounded, the walking wounded that we call our families. We have to start fighting with each other. We got to make sure that we're all wearing the same uniform. We have to make sure that our children know that we are fighting with them. We've got to make sure that when they leave the house and they're going to work, they're going to school, they're going back to their families now, they need to know that we are fighting with them. It's important when the enemy comes at our children and it comes at our marriage that the entire family knows this. When the enemy comes at one of us, he comes at all of us, baby, because we are a unit and we are in this fight together. And we stand as one. We are in it together. We know who the enemy is. And church, your family is not your enemy. But what is referred to as the fog of war, things can get a little confusing here and then. We can become a little reckless in the moment. And without intention, we can start turning our weapons on each other. We can start speaking in absolutes. You always. You never. Why don't you ever? And in the process of fighting our fight, we get involved in something called friendly fire. And these are things many times we cannot take back. Now, for those of you that don't know what friendly fire is, let me tell you, friendly fire is an attack by a military force on friendly troops while attempting to attack the enemy. You see, friendly fire, and I want you to catch this, it's on the screen. Friendly fire is never deliberate, but the wounds left behind are real. We have to realize the power of our words. And that what we say, we cannot just simply disregard. But not only do we live with it, but so do they. And the wounds are very real. I got to ask you a question this morning. I wanted to encourage you just to do a little self-reflection. Does your family currently know the fight you're in? Do they know what you're facing at work? Are your kids aware of the stresses of your finances? Students, kids in the room, do your parents know the struggles you're having at school or with your friends? You see, in the process of trying to protect those we love most, we can accidentally or unintentionally put them in the line of our fire when we walk in the door at the end of the day. Injuring those that we should be protecting and building up and that we should be gaining the most strength from. We got to stop putting people in danger. And I've got to ask you to reflect a little bit further. When it comes to your family, are you all wearing the same uniform? Does your family know you're for them and you're with them? Do your neighbors and family and extended friends know that you are in it together? We've got to make sure that we're showing up to church together. We have to make family meals together a value again. I think it's about time that we start calling family meetings and getting on the same page. And not just talking it out, but praying it out. And then when we walk away, it's not just a mom and dad are going to figure it out thing, but how about if we help our kids develop their own prayer list that they're able to pray through? Because the same God that hears us hears them. And we've got to let them know it's not just dependent on what we're bringing to the table. It's dependent on what God is going to show up and do in this situation. And how about this one? This was a lesson that was hard for me to learn. We've got to make sure that we're making time for vacations. My mentor used to say to me back when I didn't quite believe in vacations, he said, Dallas, when you start valuing their vacation, they'll start valuing your vocation. We got to make time for each other and make sure that we're all in this with each other. Ultimately, this is all taking a physical, psychological, and emotional toll on us. I think we can all agree on that. Everything we're facing with family, it's anything but easy. And ultimately, we're all in this fight together. And actually, when you really think about it, we all want the same outcome. Our desire is that in the midst of the fight, we would come out the other side and our kids would grow up to be men and women of God. That we would be able to look at our marriages and say, ooh, that looks a lot more like loving like Jesus. Man, that's some good stuff right there, man. I'm proud of that. We actually like each other, not just say we love each other. And we get this picture of what we're supposed to look like, what we're supposed to be like. And it looks amazing, but we're not even quite sure what that standard even means or how we even arrive there. We just know that it's a destination that obscurely we're aiming at. But we're confused about the process and we don't know how to meet it. But ultimately, if that was true, and we all could just arrive at perfection, that would mean that God messed up. Now, some of you are about to rush the stage and yell hypocrite at me, but give me a moment on this, okay? Because if this were true, God messed up. You see, in Genesis, we read about a perfect place called the Garden of Eden. It was the perfect environment. And then we take it a step further and we read about the perfect place where these two perfect people, they were God's children, Adam and Eve, were to be raised. They were the perfect children. So you have the perfect home and you have the perfect children, but it moves even beyond that. You have the perfect parent that shows up on the scene, and that our Father God is there to raise them in the way that they ought to go. And in this perfect home, with these perfect children, with this perfect parent, there was only one rule. If we find it right here in Genesis chapter 2, verse 17, it says, "You must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die." This is the only rule. Now, you've probably read or heard the rest of the story. Adam and Eve choose foolishly. Defying what God told them, our human decay and ultimately death are stark reminders of the wrong choice that they made in the garden that day. Made by perfect people in a perfect environment, raised by a perfect parent. So my question is, what did God do wrong? Well, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6 tells us this. Start children off in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not turn from it. So if he, being God, trained them in the way they should go, why did Adam and Eve choose the other option? If Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6 is a guarantee of success for parents, why wasn't a guarantee for the author of the very book we're reading? Enter free will. I'm talking about a God-given freedom to choose. Part of being created in his image, Adam and Eve exercised it. And your children and their children and your children's children will exercise it also. So if controlling your kids is not the option, what is? Well, I have a few God-given ideas I want to talk through with you today. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. And for some of you, I encourage you, you need to be writing this down, or you need to be opening up the YouVersion app and following along in the notes, because again, I believe the Holy Spirit is wanting to speak something for your family today. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13 says this, "No test or temptation that comes your way is beyond what others have had to face." Here's what I'm getting at. This is not the first or last time that anybody's dealt with what you're dealing with. It's happened before, and it's going to happen again. I underlined it for you. All you need to remember. So get this in your head. When it looks ugly, when it looks impossible, when you're feeling down, all you need to remember is that God will never let you down. You know what that is? Peace. Peace. He'll never let you be pushed past your limit. He'll always be there to help you come through it. So what I'm saying to you today is this: God sees. God knows. God understands. Ultimately, my God answers. He sees beyond the pretty picture on your mantle. He sees beyond the perfect family you try to showcase here every Sunday morning and throughout the week as you show up at your kids' baseball tournaments. And he knows the pain and the anxiety that you feel by night and you handle by day. And there in the midst of it all, his word tells us right here in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, he's not going anywhere. But we still have a role in facing the fights of our family. We must look to the word of God and make a choice today. We've got to choose to fight with our family God's way. I've got 4 things I believe that God spoke to me today that's also just going to be just right for where you're at. And I want to share them with you right now. The first choice I believe that we've got to make today is we have to choose blessing and not curses. When it comes to our families, we've got to choose blessing and not curses. I've got bad news. There is no perfect family. No matter how good you look on the outside, it lacks perfection. And if you do find the perfect family, warning, when you stepped into it, it's now dysfunctional. You may say, well, you don't know my family. I'm the only one holding this sucker together. But here's the deal. Sooner or later, you're going to be the source of the frustration and the dysfunction. Because we are all flawed. Now, some of you out there, you're thinking, but listen, hey, I know I'm not perfect, but I still know what we need to do. And if they would just shut up and listen to me, we would get this thing done in like a week and a half, okay? If my husband would just obey, if my children would just do what I told them. But ultimately, we can't control them, can we? We might force them in the moment to do what we want them to do. We might scream them into submission, but it won't last. Ultimately, the only person you can control as your family is you. That means that when wrong happens, you got to respond right. Now, that's hard. Responding right to wrong is not our default setting, is it? You do wrong by me, I'm going to escalate this sucker and you're going to pay for it. But our actions influence not only the present, but the outcome. And either we are blessing or we are cursing in every moment of our lives. Matthew chapter 7, verse 12 issues this challenge. Ask yourself what you want people to do for you, then take the initiative and do it for them. We got to make sure and add to the peace, not the problem. We have to add to the peace and not the problem. We have to choose to not be easily provoked. Now, anybody ever been to like a theme park and seen these cute little merry-go-rounds? Like when I go to one with my family, my girls just immediately, Daddy, we got to ride the merry-go-round. It's going to be so fun. Yeah. I want to ride the dolphin. I'm going to ride the unicorn. You see what I'm saying? Anybody ever had experience with one of those? Okay, exactly. We've all seen or at least ridden a merry-go-round. But so many times we're on a ride of our own that's much like a merry-go-round when it comes to the conflicts in our homes. You see, we get on this ride and we go up and down, and round we go with the same conversations, the same arguments, the same issues, the same conflicts over and over and over again, day after day, week after week, month after month, sometimes decade after decade. Here's my challenge to you today. Speak blessing and not curses and get off that ride. Break the cycle. Spouses, get off the ride. But they're still on it. They just won't shut up. They just keep doing this and they just keep doing that. Who's the only person you can control? You. Who's the only person that can set a new dynamic and a direction in your family that you have control of? You. Spouses, get off the ride. We got to stop being each other's biggest critic, and we got to start becoming each other's biggest cheerleader. Hurrah! I'm not much of a cheerleader, but I'm trying, babe. We've got to make sure that our spouse hears more about how we love them than they hear more about how disappointed we are that they forgot to wash the dishes again. Ooh, that was hard. You may say, well, it's just hard to find good stuff. Search for it. Blessings, not curses. Moms and dads, this one's tough because kids can be downright irritating. But we've got to make sure that we validate more than we correct. We've got to make sure that we understand the power of this weapon we call a tongue and that we use it for good and not evil. That we speak life over our children. That we speak value over our children. That we guide them and we do not destroy them with our words that they end up carrying through a lifetime. And yeah, they need a little help. They might need a little bit of pruning. Meaning you cut back a little things here and a little bit of there because, their manners aren't just right or they can't have that kind of attitude. But may we never just go and completely just cut that sucker down and throw it into the fire. We got to keep building up our kids. It might hurt, but parents, I've got a message for you from your kids. Don't give up on us. Don't give up on us. Now, for students and kids in the room today, I got a challenge for you too. This is going to be tough, but give your parents the benefit of the doubt. Know this, they're not always going to say it right. They're not always going to do it right. Just like I said, we're all flawed. But know this, they love you and they want the best for you. And when it's not perfect, trust their intentions. And still give them a voice in your life because they want you to be the best you possible. Now, I grew up in a home, probably a lot like a lot of you in this room, and it wasn't always pretty first thing in the morning. There were arguments, people were yelling, it was a little crazy, brush your teeth, get your backpack, why aren't you dressed yet, get out of bed, don't talk to me like that. Anybody else ever been in a home like that in a morning time experience? Okay, I am not the only one. The rest of you are liars. Next week's sermon, lying, and God's judgment upon you. But my parents had a strategy. No matter how we started the day, when we got in the car on the way to school, they started speaking blessings over me. They started telling me, hey, Dallas, I love you. You're a good guy. Hey, you got this today. You can do it, pal. They wouldn't say, have a good day. They would say, make it a good day. And ultimately, when we pulled up to the school, one thing that my parents always made us do is after they spoke a blessing over us, I didn't know what they were doing at the time. It wasn't until I grew up and I started to process. They would make me quote a blessing over myself. They would say, okay, Psalms 19:14. And I'd have to go, okay, Psalms 19:14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. And some days it wasn't even that pretty, okay? It was like very sarcastic. It's like Psalms 19:40. Let the words of my mouth, meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Okay, I'll see you later. Pick me up by 3:15. Bye. But what they were doing is they were instilling a blessing and withdrawing curses on my life. We need to make sure that in strategic moments of our life, in our days, we make it a plan to bless our children and to make sure they're speaking blessings over themselves. We have to choose blessings over curses. Because curses, sad to say, are our default setting in our flawed humanity. We got to make the choice. Choose blessing, not curses. And number two, if we want to fight with each other, if we want to fight with our family, we have to choose resolution, not revolution. Now, throughout history, if you see revolution, you can know this. It is messy. Okay, heads are cut off, lives are lost, you burn down buildings, you're rioting in the streets. It's all about bringing down what you believe to be evil and wrong. It's about putting it underneath your feet because you want that put behind you and you were ready for a new day, you were ready for a new way, and baby, that's gotta go. We gotta be careful that when we see something wrong in our family, we don't embrace revolution, but we seek out resolution. That we don't end up emotionally and mentally burning the house down around us every time we think something is out of order. Jesus not only died for your sins, I've got news for you, he died for everybody else's sins too. So when others commit offenses against you, Jesus has already forgiven them. So shouldn't we do the very same thing? We should not have to be in a forgiving mood of our family. God is asking you to forgive them the right way and right away so that seeds of bitterness never take root in your heart. You see, many families suffer in relationships not because they are in lack of love for each other, but because they don't know how to forgive each other when hurt comes. But it's not just about the forgiving, it's about resolution. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 and verse 7 says this, there is a right time for everything. A time to be quiet. Man, that's tough sometimes, isn't it? And a time to speak up. Ultimately, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You have to show them that you care. Right now, I'm going to give you 4 steps to resolution. And for those of you that are dealing with a lot of conflict in your home right now, you may be ignoring the rest of what I'm saying today, but you need to catch hold of this. You got to show them that you care. It's an acronym. The C stands for communicate. You see, in a relationship, when communication starts to break down, everything else follows. People don't just hear your words. You know what they really hear? Your attitude. So we've got to make sure that as we're expressing our feelings, that they hear love and they don't hear disappointment, frustration, and anger. We've got to check ourselves in the midst of our communication with each other and make sure that we are actively sharing and not shouting. And we've got to make sure that when it comes to communication, that we're focused on the what of what we're trying to fix and not directing it all at the person and the who that we happen to be irritated by at the moment. We've got to learn how to C, communicate. A, actively listen. Actively listen. My wife's actually a school teacher, and every day at school she tells her students, now class, make sure to put on your good listening ears. But maybe that's something we need to do in the middle of our conflicts, where it's not just about making sure they hear us, but that we hear and understand them. And many times, isn't that where we mess up? That when we listen, we're not listening so that they're heard and that they're understood. Instead, so many times we make the mistake of listening simply so we can actively and effectively reply. We need to hear what the people we love are truly saying. Resolution most often comes when we stop trying to be right and instead we simply try to understand. You release resolution when you choose to relate to the person you're talking to. So you got to, number one, communicate. Number two, you got to actively listen. Number three, you got to review options. This is where you're looking for real solutions. You're not just wanting to talk around it. You're not just wanting to talk at it. This is not just about having it out finally with the person. It's about handling it so that it doesn't handle you. Because if you don't handle it, it will end up pushing the self-destruct button on that person, and then it will go on to the rest of your family. That's why there are so many families that they don't even talk anymore. Because they went and they talked at each other without coming to any form of resolution. They gave no options. We've got to make sure that if we're the problem, that we admit it. In other words, I'm telling you, if you've blown it, own it and make it right. I'm telling you that especially with your children, if you've made a mistake, teach your kids about forgiveness by asking for it. Did that hurt me as bad? It hurt you as bad as it hurt me? That isn't easy all the time, is it? And number 4, you always got to end with solution. Healthy conflict can make us stronger. Don't just blow up. Make sure that we grow up and that we show that we care. Now, this whole entire care thing really came home for me in this last year. How many of you had kids that ended up having to go online to school and found it overall a pretty frustrating experience? And for everyone that didn't go through that, you at least saw the frustration from the outside and saw the pain that the parents were going through. But it wasn't just the parents, it was the pain and the frustration and the struggle that our own children had to go through as they were watching videos and maybe not always quite connecting to what the teacher or the little video link was trying to tell them. And as parents, when it gets to a certain grade level, we no longer understand it ourselves. Well, my son Judah started to really struggle in school this year. Started having a hard time when we were watching online, we were doing all the stuff online, and then it carried over to when we ended up going back to school. And he started coming home telling me things like, Dad, I hate school. I hate this. I hate that. I don't want to go. It's too hard. I don't understand. He's all angry. He's all frustrated. But instead of communicating with him, you know what I started doing? I started shouting at him, oh, you're going to go back to school. Oh, you're going to work hard. That's not the attitude we have in this house. What do you mean you didn't do your homework? Go to your room. No more Xbox. And I wasn't really listening to understand. I was listening to reply and show him that he's wrong and that he can fix it, and it's just about his bad attitude. One day, my wise and beautiful wife walked in and said, I think we need a new strategy. Thank you for being so smart, Linz. She said, I think what he's really telling me is I'm having a hard time. Can I get some help? So we hired a tutor, and the tutor started coming twice a week to our home and working with Judah. And something magical happened. He began to understand. He began to learn. All of a sudden, school wasn't so horrendous, and everyone wasn't so mean. And his grades turned around, and he went from we weren't sure if he was going to pass the 5th grade to now he's actually doing really well in his grades. And his teacher told me this last week how fantastic Judah's doing. We've got to make sure that in the midst of conflict with our children and our spouse, that we're not emotionally starting a revolution with them, but that we're helping them find resolution, because we're fighting with. When We're not against them. We're all on the same team together. We are a unit. We've got to make sure that we help them by caring for them, that we communicate, actively listen. We review options and we end in solution. How do we know if it's really working? Well, this is simple. Resolution heals. Revolution hurts. Look at your family right now in your interaction with them. Are you helping? Are you hurting? Are things better when you show up, or do they seem to escalate in a negative direction? So we got to make sure that we are choosing blessing and not curses. We have to seek out resolution and not revolution. And number 3, we have to choose together, not alone. We have to choose together, not alone. We need to realize that as a family, we've got allies. We are for each other. We are with each other. This family knows how to fight with each other. We need to make sure that our spouse is involved in the fights that we are facing. We need to make sure our kids know what's going on. And like I said earlier, call those family meetings, have those prayer times, and make sure that you're praying when you walk away and that you're all on the same page and in this thing together. Help your kids make a prayer list, guys. Let them know what we are facing and draw up a family battle plan. But sometimes it needs to go a little bit further than that, and we need to call in reinforcements. Here's what I want to tell you today. Your family's not alone. We are your family. And we're telling you today, you're not just fighting with your family is fighting with you. Psalms chapter 37, verse 30 says this: the godly offer good advice. They know what is right from wrong. You know, one of the most beautiful gifts my parents ever gave me? It was simply staying together. When they had their conflict, they had their struggles, they had their seasons, they didn't seek out lawyers, they sought out counselors. They sought out conferences. They went to marriage seminars. They had weekends away. Like any couple, they had their seasons, but they always came back together. Josh McDowell, I mentioned him earlier, and he said this when it comes to family. He said, every kid needs to say, I want what my mom and dad have. But sometimes as a family, we need a little bit of outside help, and we need to call in those reinforcements to get fresh perspective. In fact, just yesterday, we had a premarital seminar, and those come around periodically throughout the year where we help you work out what are those details before you make that lifelong commitment to each other. Or maybe you're even married and you just need to kind of like re-up and reimagine and relearn it. That's there for you too. But then we also have the XO conference, the biggest marriage conference in the nation, right here in the house in February. Make it a value to be here. Or what about this summer? We're actually going to be doing classes on Wednesday nights starting on June 9th. And 2 of the classes we're going to be offering is Marriage on the Rock, which is all about how to find a marriage based on God and reimagine what your day-to-day is supposed to look like as a couple. But then also we have Financial Peace University. If it as a family, you're facing some financial tension right now, you got to get that stuff in order. We want to help you as a church family. You may say, well, it's not about my marriage, it's about my children. Well, guess what? We have a premier student and kids ministry here. But our ministries can't engage with you as a family if you aren't showing up. See, so many times we want to make everything else a priority, and then we wonder why our priorities get out of whack. Help your kids right now make the right decisions by being in the right place around the right people so that they go in the right way. Let Pastor Elisha and Ray help you. Let Pastor Matt and his team be there for you. You're not alone. We're in this together. So don't give up. You can still find each other. You can find your way home. Why? Because we is stronger than me. We is always stronger than me. Let grace fight with you today. And lastly, after you choose blessings instead of curses, after you choose resolution instead of revolution, after you choose not to go at it alone, but go at it together, lastly, you have to choose faith and not frustration. Choose faith and not frustration today. Like Pastor Andrea said last week, you have to choose to trust God completely. Psalm chapter 37, verse 39 says this: the salvation of the righteous is from the Lord. He is their strength in time of trouble. Right now, you may feel surrounded. You might feel overwhelmed. You might have already even accepted your defeat and that there is no hope. There is no tomorrow. But baby, your fight is not over yet. And you're still thinking, well, you just don't get me. You don't know my story. You don't know my struggle. You don't know the counseling I've been to. I've already chosen this blessing instead of these curses. I speak all sorts of life over my family, and they don't hear me. Or you might be saying, hey, when it comes to resolution, I'm always choosing that. It's my family that's pushing the revolution button. I'm doing what's right. But it doesn't seem to matter. Or hey, I've already called this youth pastor or this kid's pastor. We've already been to that conference. That didn't work for me. But just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that God isn't moving. Just because it might look dark, guess what? There is a dawn. I believe that is coming your way. Let me remind you again of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. It's where we started. No test or temptation that comes your way is beyond what others have had to face. This is not the last time anyone's going to face what you're facing. God knows, and he's there with you. And all you need to remember is that God will never let you down. He'll never let you be pushed past your limit. He'll always be there to help you come through it. God is on your side. He is a father to the fatherless. He will stick closer than a brother. When you go and seek, you will always find. When you knock, that door is always going to be open. When you draw close to him, he will always draw close to you. He will never leave you or let you down. So with that in mind, knowing that he is for you and not against you, I encourage you to embrace this mantra: never stop fighting with family. There's hope. You might be down, but you're not out. But you've got to ask yourself this question today: how are you handling the fight with your family? Are you helping or are you hurting? What steps are you capable of making this week towards blessing, resolution, getting together with your family and with those you need, and embracing faith? The choice, it's yours. Spouses, choose blessing. Choose to resolve and choose to get together in faith. Moms and dads, for your families, I beg you, choose to bless, choose to resolve, and choose to get together in faith. Don't embrace the frustration. Don't look at it and say, it's helpless, it's hopeless, I give up, I throw in the towel, I raise the white flag. That says I'm doing this on my own. Faith says it may not look pretty, but God is on my side. And children, my challenge to you is to do this. Honor your father and mother. They ultimately want the best for you. Give them a chance to speak into your life. But ultimately, no matter how hard any of you try today, when it comes to fixing and formulating your family God's way, you cannot do it without Jesus. So if you're in this place today and maybe things look out of whack, they're out of order, know this, it all has to start with Jesus. And if you don't know Jesus yet, this is your chance. This is your opportunity. Romans 3:23 tells us this: everybody's sinned, everybody's made a mistake, everybody's messed up at some point in time. And it says in Romans 6:23, because of that sin we've now committed, we now deserve to die and be separated from God and thrown into hell for all eternity. But that upset God, our Father, so much that it says in John 3:16 that he loved us and he loved the world so much that he sent his only son, Jesus, to die for us. And now all we have to do is recognize the truth of 1 John 1:9, where it says if we confess with our mouths, if we admit our mistakes, if we admit our dependence on him, it says that he will forgive us of our sin and we can come back into relationship with him. He's a gracious and merciful God, but it's about us making the right choice. If you're in this place today and you're saying, I got to get things right with God, I'm not where I need to be. If that's you, on the count of 3, would you just shift your hand up in the air? If that's you and you need to get things right with God right now, if that's you, on the count of 3, shift your hand up in the air. 1, 2, don't hesitate. Don't miss this moment. 3, if that's you, I see that hand. Yes, yes, yes. Come on, let's celebrate with these folks. Yeah, I see that hand. I see that hand. Yeah, 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 yes. Jesus is the one you're looking for today. I want us all to pray this prayer together right now, family style. It's a prayer of salvation. So for everybody that raised their hand, you pray this prayer. And for the rest of us as a Grace family, I want you to pray this with us in support and celebration of what God's doing in their life. Can everybody repeat this prayer after me? Dear Jesus, I confess I don't have it all figured out. In fact, I've done wrong. Forgive me of my sin. I need you. Thank you for your love and your mercy and your grace. Give it to me now. I need to know that I am yours and that you are mine. Amen. When you prayed that simple prayer right now, what you did is you acknowledged that I'm not enough, but he is. You asked him for forgiveness, and every sin you've ever committed in your entire life was wiped away. And you've now invited him into your day-to-day, and you've invited him ultimately into the relationships of your life. For the rest of you in this room today, you might say, listen, I already had this Jesus thing figured out, but my family, I still need some help. I need to stop fighting with, and I need to figure out how to start fighting with my family today. If you're in this place, I want you to stand on your feet if you're saying you are ready to start fighting with your family. And when you do it, don't just kind of casually. I want you to stand up with some faith in your heart of saying, I'm putting aside my frustrations. I'm putting aside my curses. I'm putting aside the revolution. And I'm saying, God, bring the blessing. I'm saying,